Toy Story 4 is the kinda, sorta, not really expected continuation of the Toy Story saga, and once again the story follows Woody, Buzz, and the gang, as well as a new toy named Forky, a spork thing created by Bonnie at her kindergarten orientation, who doesn't really understand what he is. But he was the first spark of joy for Bonnie in a situation that she was absolutely terrified by. When Forky tries to run away, Woody, Buzz, and the other toys must try to bring him back, which, as you can imagine, starts a whole new adventure. I think the original Toy Story trilogy is a perfect trilogy. Sure, the animation has improved with each passing movie, but I truly believe that these movies are perfect in literally every way. I thought that Toy Story 3 concluded the story in a really satisfying and emotional way, which is why I really didn't expect Pixar to make Toy Story 4. Yes, I know there is an argument to suggest that Pixar made this movie for the money, and while I do get where you're coming from if you agree with that argument, and you are entitled to your own opinion, but I have to disagree with you purely because Pixar are the animation studio that waited 14 years to make Incredibles 2, and if they were so desperate to make Toy Story 4 so they can make a fat pile of cash, why did they wait 9 years? Anyway, I was surprised that Toy Story 4 is a thing, but I was also happy because that means I get to see these characters again on the big screen. That said, I also get worried every time they try to continue a perfect trilogy with a fourth movie because of how perfectly satisfying the trilogy before it was. I love the original Alien trilogy, and yes, that includes Alien 3, the assembly cut to be specific. Then Alien Resurrection came along and almost completely destroyed the franchise. That movie was so bad that even its own producers, Walter Hill and David Giller, opposed the movie's creation. The Bourne trilogy was awesome, and then we got The Bourne Legacy, which didn't even have Jason Bourne in it, and then, ironically, Jason Bourne. It's extremely hard to make a trilogy of movies that's as good as the Toy Story movies. They had not made a single bad Toy Story movie. I think they're all great. But I was worried about this movie like many people were. I didn't want this movie to be bad, but I was ready for the possibility that it wouldn't be anywhere near as good as the first three. Which is why I'm extremely happy to say that Toy Story 4 is my favorite movie of 2019. I think this might even be one of my favorite movies of all time. Long story short, I love Toy Story 4. I think Toy Story 4 could very well become the prime argument when defending the continuation of a franchise after its completion, because this movie is some of the most fun I've had in a cinema all year. It was an absolute blast. I thought Toy Story 3 was the perfect conclusion to this franchise, and that's probably why it's easy to look at this movie and think that the only reason it even exists is because of one thing. There are even times in this movie where it just feels like yet another adventure that these characters are going on. But it's done so well that I just don't care. Toy Story 4 takes the characters in a direction that I honestly did not expect. One of the main storylines in this movie revolves around the character Forky, who was the first real connection that Bonnie made at kindergarten, and that made her think, yeah, school could be okay. So Woody sees how important Forky is to Bonnie and naturally feels protective of Bonnie, but in order to make sure Bonnie is safe and happy, Woody must now protect Forky. Forky has no freaking idea what's going on. He doesn't even know if he's a toy or what he is. I did get worried that this dynamic would basically be a beat-for-beat copy of the Woody and Buzz storyline from the first movie, but they did something really cool with these two characters that not only shows how far Woody has come as a character, but through the interactions between Woody and Forky, the filmmakers are able to explore what these characters think in terms of what it actually means to be a toy. Every one of the main characters has their own idea of what it means to be a toy, so when characters got into conflict with each other because of their individual views, it was pretty fascinating at times, and at the risk of sounding unforgivably cheesy, it was super deep, because of how that question is explored through the characters, in particular Woody, who more often than not has to decide what he's willing to do for Bonnie and what that's going to take. In many ways, Woody essentially becomes a father figure to Forky, and in some ways even Bonnie, which is one of the best themes of this movie because it delves into the idea of protection of those we love and questioning how far is too far, and whether or not being overly protective is a bad thing. A lot of the theme of protection is explored through Bo Peep, who, by the way, is a total badass in this movie. This is the best this character has ever been. She got one hell of an upgrade from when we last saw her in these movies, and she is awesome because of it. And the movie does heavily focus on the relationship between Bo Peep and Woody to tremendous effect. In the first couple of movies, it was more of a flirtatious relationship with really not that much depth to it. But in Toy Story 4, we have a fully fleshed out relationship between these characters that feels well-rounded as well as real. They handled this relationship gorgeously, which is also elevated by the fantastic voice work by Tom Hanks and Annie Potts. I mean, do I even need to say that the voice acting was good in this movie? Everyone was good in this movie. Tim Allen as Buzz is awesome, as usual. Joan Cusack is amazing as Jessie. I mean, I probably just butchered the hell out of her name, which, by the way, I apologize, madam, but still, everyone is amazing as usual. Even the new characters are great. What they do with Keanu Reeves in this movie was brilliant. From a comedic perspective, he brought some of the biggest laughs. He's a Canadian stuntman, and he's amazing. Key and Peele as Bunny and Ducky, they made the comedy in this movie. These guys were freaking hilarious and easily the funniest part of the movie, and I mean that in the best way. All of the new characters, especially Forky, risk being annoying. But I ended up thinking Forky was super cute, and I ended up becoming really attached to that character. However, I would just like to point out something very important. Forky is a spork, not a fork. A fork is a fork on its own. A spork is a spoon and a fork combined. Honestly. Speaking of the comedy, usually animated movies have boundaries with the comedy. When it comes to the boundaries in Toy Story 4, what boundaries? This movie does not hold back. There are even a few offensive jokes in this movie, which isn't a first for these movies, I'm not gonna lie. In Toy Story 1, we had Buzz Lightyear, for example. To see that dry humor make a comeback in this movie was refreshing because it made me think, thank you, at least somebody understands it. Because it's very rare that we get an animated movie that isn't held back by comedic boundaries. They do something especially creepy with the villains in this movie. For crying out loud, there's a freaking The Shining reference in this movie. It really doesn't hold back. It doesn't play it safe. Which all I can say is, thank cheese. It doesn't feel like one of those checkbox plays it safe Disney movies. This is a Pixar movie. They know their shit. And they did a dang good job with this movie. Going back to the villains for just a sec. They are terrifying. They are easily the scariest villains in the Toy Story saga. Like I said, there's a reference to The Shining, and even visually there's a Goosebumps reference in the designs. They also made the villains surprisingly sympathetic though, which is weird in a good way because they creeped the hell out of me. But at the same time, I was able to feel a huge amount of sympathy for them, which I didn't see coming. As for the emotional beats of this movie, I'll confess, Toy Story 3 made me emotional, but I didn't cry. Although I did come close. In recent years, I've become much more of a movie crybaby, and Toy Story 4 made me cry twice. In one part of the movie, I didn't even expect to cry. In the other, I did expect to cry, which isn't a bad thing, but the point is, both moments hit me hard enough to make me shed tears. I didn't think I was going to be as wrapped up in it as I was, and without spoiling anything, the way they concluded things in this movie felt like they'd been setting this up since the beginning. Despite this movie being the sequel to the movie that was meant to be the finishing point of this saga, and that just blows my mind. I gotta talk about the animation in this movie, because I don't care what anybody says to me, this animation is photorealistic. I know what I'm about to say may sound a little hyperbolic, but I genuinely believe that Toy Story 4 is the most visually stunning movie Pixar has ever produced. The opening sequence that takes place in the rain. I'm sorry, but the rain, it's real! Every single drop felt like a real drop of photorealistic water, and it was just gorgeous! Josh Cooley directed this movie, and this is his first feature-length film. To my knowledge, he's done 2 short films and was one of the writers of Inside Out, and I gotta say, this is one of the most impressive feature debuts I have ever seen. Cooley's direction of this movie is masterful, which is so clearly evident in the way he directs the action sequences, the emotional beats, all the way down to the way the characters are moved in and around the screen. It's breathtaking. Toy Story 4 is an extremely well-made movie that is gorgeously animated, beautifully directed, and fabulously written. There are now 4 Toy Story movies, and each movie has been consistently flawless and improved on each other in their own unique ways, and Toy Story 4 is in no way, shape, or form different in that regard. I would even go as far as to say that while I think that in terms of quality, each movie in the Toy Story saga is as good as each other, 4 is probably my favorite because it was the most emotionally satisfying. That's not to say that the other movies weren't emotionally satisfying, believe me, they were. But I don't know how they did it, but Toy Story 4 was the most emotionally satisfying movie in this saga, and one of the most emotionally satisfying movies I think I've ever seen. Toy Story 4 is my favorite movie of the year, and I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. Glorious! So those are my thoughts on Toy Story 4. I do hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But before I go, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of Toy Story 4? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will indeed see you guys in the next one. So until next time, see you around.